After more than a year of unimaginable pain, celebrations on Gaza's streets as news of the ceasefire filtered through tonight. Young lives overshadowed by this war. Now finally a chance of a more peaceful future.
والله احنا فرحانين كثير انه الهم والحزن والقصف والموت اللي صار فينا انه خلص بطل صار وقف وانه حنرجع بلادنا وحنرجع لاهلنا.
Earlier today, heart-wrenching final embraces, even in what could prove to be the final hours of Israel's deadly war in Gaza. These, the victims of a strike in Deir al-Balah that killed 11 people, including 4 children from one family. Any ceasefire too late for them and more than 46,000 others here.
يعني احنا من اسبوعين واحنا بنتبع الاخبار انه تهدئه ومش تهدئه والكلام اللي بنسمعه. اللي على ارض الواقع يا جماعه غير تماما. اللي على ارض الواقع كل يوم مزيد من القتل، مزيد من التدمير، مربعات سكنيه باكملها بتمحى، احياء باكملها بتمحى.
Peace in Gaza would mean peace in a wasteland. 2/3 of all buildings in the territory destroyed or damaged by Israeli strikes. With practically the entire population displaced and hunger widespread, everyone has been hoping for an end to the fighting.
الناس في انتظار كل لحظة إنه الهدنة تبدأ، لأنه للأمانة إحنا مش عايشين، إحنا عايشين بحكم الموتى، هذه مش حياة. كل دقيقة بتمر علينا كأنها سنة، الناس بتموت كل لحظة.
In Israel's hostage square, focal point for the families of the more than 90 Israeli hostages still held captive by Hamas. Tonight, there was cautious optimism.
We are just waiting for them to come home. We're excited, obviously, but until they're not here, we don't want to get too excited.
There's also still fear. On multiple occasions, a deal has seemed imminent, only to fall through. 33 hostages would be released in a first 6-week phase in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian detainees. Will the two sides be able to agree on continuing the deal beyond that?
We know that there can be many accidents on the way and many issues that can postpone it or delay it, so we are not there yet.
Amidst the misery and squalor that has become Gaza, families dream of their old lives. Amal, suffering from cancer, forced to flee Gaza City, is already imagining what it would be like to return to whatever is left of her home.
أنا يمكن لما يفتحوا الحاجز يقولوا يلا ارجعوا، يمكن مع الفرحة ما بعرف، يمكن أمشي حافية من كتر الفرحة، يمكن آخذ حفيد من أحفادي، يعني يمكن محمد قديش صغير بالعمر، عمره أيام، يمكن هيك أحضنه وأركض فيه، أمسك أحفادي، يعني أولادي هيك ماشيين وراي، هالعالم كلها تركض، يعني راجعة أحس خطواتي إنها عم تركض، أنا كأني راكبة طيارة بوصولي لغزة.
Two peoples divided by so much, united for now in cautious hope.
Well, the outlines of this deal are really pretty much the same as the outlines of the deal that we've been talking about for much of the past year after it was outlined by President Biden last May. Since then, thousands more Palestinians as well as multiple Israeli hostages have been killed. It's hard to escape the conclusion that a key driving factor behind the success of the talks at this stage now is the upcoming inauguration of President Trump. He had threatened that all hell would be unleashed if the hostages are not released. But perhaps it's his impact on the Israeli government that is more significant. Netanyahu, it seems, likely thought that whilst Biden was in power, that perhaps Trump would be more supportive of his war effort. But Trump making clear that he wanted an end to the war before he took office. We'll have to wait and see if that's what this ceasefire agreement evolves into. We'll also have to wait and see what kind of offers may have been made to the Israeli right in terms of their plans for the occupied West Bank in order to get them on board with this agreement.
All good, Christian. Sikander, thank you very much indeed there in Tel Aviv. Well, joining me now is Shiron Lifshitz, whose elderly father is still being held hostage in Gaza. Her mother was freed after 2 weeks in captivity. Welcome to the studio, Shiron.
Thank you for
How do you feel?
Cautious, almost speechless, almost I haven't prepared for a yes. We have gone through so long.
Because you've been here before as well, haven't you? With deals that you thought were going to happen and they didn't happen.
Exactly.
Seems that this one is going to happen.
It has been agreed. It hasn't been agreed since the last deal that fell through. And that is the most important thing, that, you know, we need to make sure that it happens, that the first stage lead to the second stage and that it doesn't collapse halfway.
And we can see some pictures now, I think, of your mother and father. Your mother, as we said earlier, was released after 2 weeks. I'll ask you about her in a minute, but your father is still in Gaza. Do you actually know, and this is a difficult question, but do you know whether he's alive?
No, we don't know. We do
know.
not know. We do not know. We know he was 84. He is 84. He wasn't in great health. It would take a bit of a miracle for him to survive in these conditions. But we didn't believe my mom will come back alive either. We have to hold on to the hope. And I have to prepare myself to at least knowing.
Must be so difficult to be here tonight on what could be a night of celebration or just a night of knowing.
I think above all, there are 98 hostages. Out of them, we know we have a lot of funerals coming, but we also know that some of them will be reunited with their families, and there's nothing more we can ask for at this point. I think it's time for a ceasefire. It's time to withdraw from Gaza. It's time to alleviating the suffering on both sides and in Gaza too.
Should this day that we're experiencing now have happened a long time before?
Absolutely. It could have happened. Ben-Gvir just came out and
the security minister.
Yeah, and said that he delayed the deal and did everything he can to stop the deal. I think
so this is about Israeli politics, delaying the return of your father and others.
That's what he claimed. That's what that minister claimed. I don't think Hamas have done everything they could in order to save their own people. Unfortunately, they've been really harsh to their own people. And I think above all, we have to at the moment concentrate on the fact that a deal is signed, to thank the outgoing administration and the incoming administration in the States for working together, for not waiting until Trump gets into office, but putting it as a deadline. Deadline has seemed to have worked, have brought about a ceasefire, not a ceasefire yet, but it's coming, and a deal. May it be the start of a better place for all the people of the region.
Let me ask you about your mother. She was held in captivity for 2 weeks. And I'm not sure if we have pictures of her being released back in November. How is she doing? I mean, how is it like for her to adjust to normality, in inverted commas, without her husband?
It's really tough. She says sometimes she just starts speaking to him. She lost her home, everything that she ever owned. She lost so many good friends. She lives not where she lived for the last 65 years. She's also really full of life and really believe in the living. I think she finds it's really hard, but at the same time, so much has happened. She holds on to life.
Briefly and finally, a difficult question as well. Do you think you can live side by side with the Palestinians after this?
Yes. I mean, there's 7 million Jews and 7 million Palestinians living in that region. We need to find a way.
You have to live with each other. That's the
neighborhood. We need to find a way. I think this is terrible. I think if anything we should do now is make sure, this is the worst of it.
I wish you all the best, and your father, of course. Shiron Lifshitz, thank you very much for coming in. Good luck.
Thank you.
Well, we're joined now by Miri Aysin, who's a retired colonel from the Israeli Defense Forces and is now at the International Institute for Counterterrorism. Thanks for coming back on the program. What do you think was the decisive factor that led to Bibi Netanyahu agreeing this deal? Was it Donald Trump, basically reading him the riot act?
I'm going to answer you, but for a moment, I am also breathless after your talk now with Shiron Lifshitz. She makes me feel stronger, and I'm saying that sitting in Tel Aviv, and she's sitting next to you, and I just want to say, wow, okay? That's the resilience of Israeli people. I absolutely think that the Trump administration, the change of administration, meaning the fact that not Kamala Harris, but Donald Trump, and that change from the Democratic administration to the Republican administration makes a big change. It makes a change for all of the region, not just for Israel. And I think that that is part of it. But if I can gently push back at your question, why is everybody saying all of the time that this is about Israel? Because Hamas was on board, because Hamas agreed to everything, because we believe that Hamas in May was not the problem. I gently push back at that because I think we forget who Hamas is.
Well, I was going to put that question to my Palestinian guest after this interview, but there you go. You raised the question yourself. But whether I'm talking to you or I'm talking to a Palestinian official, the fact that this deal was delayed by 6 months. And it could have been signed. And in those 6 months, thousands of more people had to die. And the agony of families like the Lifshitzes had to continue. And the rubble had to, get worse. That surely must fill you with horror.
It fills me with horror because war is horror. It also fills me with horror. And I say this openly to everybody. It fills me with horror, the idea that today Yahya Sinwar is revered around the world. The people wear T-shirts with Yahya Sinwar.
But is he really revered around the world? I don't see people wearing his T-shirts on the streets of London, Berlin, or Paris, or Washington, or
I'll show them to you. You may not have seen them, but I checked them out.
But are they representative of a wider opinion?
But the thing is that in that sense, as I look at it, first of all, I don't absolve the government that I live inside of from any blame whatsoever. We were in a very challenging situation before the war started. It stepped into the war, and the issues, not just of the hostages, but of the running of this war became something political. And I say that because it's absolutely on the table. I do not think that the war could have ended in May, but that's my opinion. But I think that because of Hamas, not because of the Israeli government. Having said that, I definitely think that the Israeli government could have done more before. I wish we would have done more before, even if I think that Hamas at the time would not have fulfilled any of the things that it said it would.
And do you think that after all this horror of the last year and a few months, it is possible, or should be possible, that something good will come out of it that will last? And I'm talking here about the thing that Mr. Biden wants, and Mr. Trump may even want, a two-state solution.
Can I make the worst comparison and say that after World War II, which was a just war and an important war, at the end of the war, the world changed. And that's the only very positive aspect of every war, including this horrific war.
Yes, but how will it change?
It changes the situation.
But
at the end, as Sharon said before, between the river and the sea, as we like to call it, are 15 million people. We're not going away. We're not going away. The Palestinians, it's not Jews, Muslims, Arabs, Christians. There's so many ways to define them. We're all here, and we're going to have to find a way to live here together. And that doesn't make a happily ever after, by the way.
But do the Palestinians, after all this, deserve, and very briefly, deserve the dignity of their own self-determination, their own state?
They deserved it before, they deserve it after. Can we distinguish between the Palestinians, and I have supported the two-state solution my entire life, and Hamas, the murderous organization that planned for over 2 years the most murderous attack you can imagine?
Miri Aysin, thank you very much indeed. Well, Donald Trump, still not quite president, was quick to claim credit for the deal, although the Biden administration had been racing to get it agreed before he leaves office in just 5 days' time. So let's get the latest from our Washington correspondent, Siobhan Kennedy. Siobhan.
Well, Matt, we just saw President Biden speak in the White House. He was flanked very ceremoniously, I have to say, with his Vice President Kamala Harris beside him and his Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. We know that this is a moment that he very, very much wanted to reach, to take a victory lap on Gaza before he heads out of the office in just 5 days' time and hands over the reins to Donald Trump. Let's hear what the president had to say now, a little clip from him.
I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas. For more than 15 months of conflict that began with Hezbollah's brutal massacre on October the 7th, more than 15 months of terror for the hostages, their families, the Israeli people, more than 15 months of suffering by the innocent people of Gaza.
Well, Joe Biden is very keen to stress that this is the exact framework of the deal that he outlined several months ago back in the summer, and that this wouldn't have been achieved unless he had been pushing forward constantly with his and his team's diplomacy. But he did also stress that over the last few days he has worked, he said, as one team with the incoming President Donald Trump's team also on the ground in Tel Aviv. And he said that he is aware, of course, that the next stage of the deal, the next critical 6 weeks, will be implemented, in fact, by Donald Trump's team. But he said he believes that there is a genuine opportunity here, he thinks, for a new future. Donald Trump, you will not be surprised to hear, is also out there on his Truth social network claiming credit for the deal, calling what he said to his supporters, calling this an epic ceasefire agreement, which he said could only have happened because of his historic victory in November and his stated intention to the world, he said, that he would immediately bring about peace. Let's hear a little thing from him now. Let's see that. He said on that Truth Social post, "We've achieved so much without even being in the White House. Just imagine all of the wonderful things that will happen when I return to the White House and my administration is fully confirmed so they can secure more victories for the United States." Crucial, of course, is what happens over the next 6 weeks. Joe Biden is hoping that ceasefire will turn into a permanent ceasefire. But as we have seen throughout this brutal war, it ain't over until it's over. And that now is in the hands of Donald Trump and his team.
Indeed. Siobhan Kennedy, thanks very much. Well, Hassam Zumlot is the head of the Palestinian mission to the UK. He joins me now. Good to see you again, Ambassador Zumlot. Does it matter to you as a Palestinian whether this was Donald Trump, applying pressure to the Israelis, or Joe Biden finally being listened to?
No, it doesn't. What matters is the carnage to stop. 15 months of utter loss, grief, sheer human suffering. And finally, we have good news. We can breathe now, a sigh of relief, and look ahead.
You're confident that this will stick?
Look ahead. I'm very cautious, like all of us. Those who know Netanyahu and the Israeli composition, those who know the dynamics in Israel, will be extremely cautious. But we have got to be hopeful and press ahead. We have got to end this mass murder and learn the lessons of the last 15 months.
Okay, we'll get to those lessons in a minute. But, Donald Trump said a few days ago that unless those hostages were released and a deal was done, all hell would be unleashed. And we always thought at the time he was talking about Hamas, but actually he was probably talking about the Israelis. At the same time, it has also taken Hamas 6 months to sign up to this deal.
No, you've heard,
both sides have delayed, right?
You've heard President Biden clearly saying this was presented in May by him, and it was.
Yeah.
And it was adopted by the Security Council, and it was. And it is very well documented that it was Netanyahu who rejected it. So why are we discussing
Well, okay. But the tragedy is that in the interim, so many more people had to die.
Yeah, that's not only a tragedy. That is something that we need to absolutely make sure, A, justice is served, and B, it never, ever happens again. So yes, it's such a tragedy that we should have reached this long, long ago, actually by November 2023. And the world need to learn the lesson of its own failure. This is the first time that the international community fails to stop, let alone prevent, a genocide in real time. And I believe the impact on our international order is going to be severe. So this is a moment when we hold ourselves together and rebuild all that has been destroyed. And that is not just Gaza. It's also the buildings and the relevance of buildings in New York and our global system.
The Israelis, of course, would reject the charge of genocide, and they would say that this latest horrific round of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict would not have happened if it hadn't been for Hamas's attack on October the 7th.
Well, ICJ has said that the crime of genocide is plausible already in January last year. But I assure you, Matt, once this stops, once you and I have the ability to go to Gaza and see the criminal genocidal aggression on our people in Gaza, you and I will dread that moment.
Well, we have all been asking to go back there, to report from there. We have been denied access.
Who prevented you, Matt?
Well,
who prevented
you?
The
Israelis prevented us.
The Israelis prevented you.
Right, and we know that, and we've been talking to them about that. What happens now? Let's say the ceasefire sticks. What happens after the end of the second phase?
Number one,
how do you see the future of Gaza?
Number one, we need to make sure that this ceasefire holds. Netanyahu is maneuvering all the time, changing his goalposts and calculations and coalitions. Number two, we need to make sure it's permanent, that Israel leaves all of Gaza, that the people of Gaza are able to go back to their homes without any hindrance, that unprecedented international humanitarian assistance is delivered. Our babies is dying because of freezing and hunger and what have you. This is unmatched in human history.
Who runs Gaza?
It is the state of Palestine. What do you mean? Nobody should ask that question.
Why?
Never again, because the Palestinian people have the state of Palestine that represents all of them, that has a seat in the United Nations. Their fight, their struggle for 100 years is for that state of Palestine. The state of Palestine has its national institutions.
But which Palestinians will end up running Gaza?
There is no which Palestinians. Fatah, Hamas are political factions. I am talking, you
fight each other. You have done in the past.
Now you're discussing with me Labour and Conservatives. You're not discussing with me the UK as a state and a government. We have a government that is recognized by the world. That government, the people in Gaza are demanding, longing for the PLO and the government to come back and take its responsibility. And let me say it now and very clearly, there will be no alternative but the Palestinian national institutions, the PLO and its institutions to take over. We will not leave Gaza in a vacuum. It is our responsibility and we will fulfill it.
And we will speak to you again about what it actually looks like, but we've run out of time. Hassan Zomlo, thank you very much indeed. Well, a few minutes ago, Sir Keir Starmer gave his response to the deal. Let's get the latest reaction from Westminster and our senior political correspondent, Paul McNamara. Paul.
Yeah, it's a very delicately written statement recognising the suffering of both the Israeli hostages and the people of Gaza. The Prime Minister says after months of devastating bloodshed and countless lives lost, this is the long overdue news that the Israeli and Palestinian people have desperately been waiting for. They have borne the brunt of this conflict triggered by the brutal terrorists of Hamas. The hostages, who were brutally ripped from their homes on that day and held captive in unimaginable conditions ever since, can fondly return to their families. But we should also use this moment to pay tribute to those who won't make it home. For the innocent Palestinians whose homes turned into a war zone overnight and the many who lost their lives, the ceasefire must allow a huge surge in humanitarian aid. And then he turns to the future. This war has been a huge issue for Keir Starmer over the last 18 months. It's very close to his heart whenever you speak to him, not just because of the only British Israeli hostage who's still being held, Emily Damari. Keir Starmer has met her mother. He's always maintained that a ceasefire that would be dependent on the hostages being released. Domestically, it's also been an issue for Keir Starmer. The war is seen as the reason why Labour lost a few seats during the election. But texting with government officials tonight, texting with people surrounded by Keir Starmer, the point they make is that those domestic issues pale into insignificance when it comes to the importance of ending this war.
Paul in Westminster, thank you very much.